Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel. Today we're making a door hanger, but you can do this and make an ATC, iCAD, or art journal page. You're just going to have to change the scale. So I'm working on the door hanger. I've got it gessoed on the one side with black, and I've got a white gesso on the other. And on the left-hand side, you see a pillow box there, and that is my inspiration. While I was creating these pillow boxes and sometimes collage sheets, I come up with a pattern or a design or combination that I really love. And then I want to use that in a project. So that's what I'm doing here. So I am using ultramarine blue, Hooker's green, and I'm wetting this down, and I have a damp makeup sponge, and I'm just spreading this on the background. And I find this is a quick, easy way to spread paint on a gessoed surface or a smooth surface. I want to blend it a little bit, get a little overlap, but I know I'm going to come back and do some stenciling. In fact, this color combination you're going to see again because I have another idea where I'm basically going to use the same colors and technique of this on an art journal page. So be sure to subscribe to my channel, click the bell, select the option to get notified of upcoming videos, and that way you won't miss this follow-up video. So I'm giving this a quick dry. Now, depending on how smooth you put on the gesso, it may come up, it may show some texture. So here I'm just adding another layer of paint after I dried it, just to deepen the colors a little bit. I like the different tones, and you've got some darker, some lighter, and that's just going to make an interesting background in a very easy way. Don't have the exact blues and greens? Try the blues and greens that you have. Now I've kept this video pretty much real time. This was a very quick project because I did keep it fairly simple, but simple doesn't mean boring. So again, after drying it, I grabbed this stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and I will put a link to it and other special products in the description box below. And I am going to come in again with the makeup sponge, and I think I'm just using the same one, and Prussian blue. Now, Prussian blue is my favorite dark blue. I go through tubes and tubes of this color. It works so well. And I am just stenciling this one motif on this stencil. This is the 6-inch side, and I prefer the 6-inch side. I tend to be reaching for it more and more. And I'm turning that motif and getting parts of it. Some are going off the edge, some are going to be whole. Now the key with stenciling with acrylic paint is that you stamp off the paint. And that way you don't have wet, globby paint on the makeup sponge or the applicator that you're using. And that will make it easier so you don't get the paint underneath. So as you're seeing on this stencil, I'm using that one motif. There are several motifs on here, and you can use the stencil as a whole. But look at your stencils and look at parts of it. You might find a hidden motif or gem in there that you can utilize in your backgrounds. So again, I've used two colors, three colors with the Prussian blue, and one motif from one stencil. and I'm loving this. Now, if I was doing this on an art journal page or a bigger project, I would add some texture. And I may even use the same motif, and that will give a different look. So you have the same pattern in two different dimensions. Isn't that absolutely yummy? Now it's a gray day, which is requiring the light to be on in my art studio. So you're seeing that glare on the glass, and I apologize for that. But the only option would be to not make videos during the rainy season, and that would be months and months of it. So now I've taken some gold paint and I'm just spreading it out on my glass media mat because I'm going to stamp with this acrylic paint. Now this is a stamp, and I'll put a link to it. It's actually half the stamp. I cut it into two and I took it off the wooden block because this is the way I use it. So you can do that with your products. And I'm stamping with the gold because I love that yellow shimmer with these background colors. And I'm not worried if I'm getting a perfect stamp. So I go searching in my stash and I pull out these yellow butterflies, and I'm thinking, oh, I love how that yellow of the butterflies works with the gold in the background. Because to be honest, when I did the background, I had no idea what I was going to do in the way of focal point or sentiment. I just wanted to create something with that gorgeous background that I created when I was just doing a painting session. So I'm just gluing these butterflies down on top of part of this sentiment, just to make it easier for placement later. I just kind of broke it into two steps. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep everything kind of on the level or if I wanted to play around with the orientation of the sentiments. I decided to go pretty straight. So I was getting ready to glue this down, and then I decided that the white is just a little too stark. So I grabbed that gold paint and the makeup sponge, and I'm applying just a wash of gold paint over top. Now it's pretty translucent, so I can still see the words from underneath. Some paints, if they're more opaque, are going to really push back the words. So you have to watch on that. But if you do a wash, water the paint down, or pick one that is more translucent, you should be okay. Now, in retrospect, this I could have done or should have done the gold on the sentiment before I attached the butterfly. But I didn't know I was going to do that. And that's usually what happens when you're just in that creative mode. You sometimes have to backtrack a little bit, or something, you do it, but it's not as easy as it could be. But that's the benefit of watching the video. If you were going to duplicate this, you could then do it in the most efficient way. So to me, this background with the butterflies looks like it's an outdoor scene. You've got the blue of the sky and the green of the grass, and then the butterflies. I'm using gel medium in the matte finish, and this is the Liquitex brand. I've tried the golden, and I do prefer that. But use whatever. I've used also Mod Podge. I find that the Mod Podge, though, doesn't want dry completely matte, and so you have a little bit of a shine. So if you weren't going to be varnishing, that might be problematic. But for final copies, for final stages, I love using the gel medium. It is my go-to adhesive. And the sentiment says, I choose faith over anxiety, hope over worry, love over fear. I'm thinking now I'm going to go in and change that sentiment to say, I wish for you faith over anxiety, hope over worry, love over fear. Or you could just leave it with just the 3 words. So even though it's one sentiment, you can cut out and edit. I believe this came from my Believe sentiment pack. And I'll put a link to my sentiment pack, my digital sentiment pack video, and you can see what is available. So now I'm using the shading acrylic technique, and I'm just shading with black paint around the focal image sentiments here. And again, I will put a link to the technique tutorial where I teach specifically the shading, the floating acrylic technique. It was a video that people were asking for, and it is there, and I just want to call your attention to it if you're one of those people who've been asking for it. Now with the shading acrylic, sometimes you put in one layer, and then after it dries, you can come and do another layer and darken it up. You go in steps. And the shading and or highlighting that you do is just going to make it make the focal point kind of step out from the background. It's a little thing, but it makes a huge difference. Now, if you can't do the shading acrylic technique or haven't practiced yet, you can use a Stabilo All pencil to shade here. You can use woodless charcoal pencil. There are many ways of getting the shading around there aside from this. I like this with the floating acrylic technique because it is permanent. And this is something because that I will be varnishing, a brush-on varnish I prefer using as opposed to the sprays. So it's in my best interest to do this technique. But if it was in my art journal, it wouldn't matter. I would use any of the other techniques, and I wouldn't worry about it being reactivated because I don't varnish those. Shading, no matter which way you're doing it, is a slow process. And you're done when it looks good for you. Now this is a Sakura glaze pan, black, and I absolutely have fallen in love with these. They give bold, shiny, dimensional marks. So I'm just going around this just to bring it out a little bit more. And I do, off camera, decide I do trace around the butterflies, so when you see the final picture, that's what I've done. I'm not sure that that improved it. I'm kind of mixed minds, whether I should have just left the butterflies alone or gone with the glaze pan. I also did do some gold splatters on here. If you've got an eagle eye, you may have noticed that. Before I glued down, I think after I glued down the sentiment, I splattered with gold. So I have my gold in this fine line bottle, and I'm putting the gold around the edge. And I kind of go a little bit of sketchy. I try not to, I want this to be very fine lined because I don't want the outlining to overpower the rest. So thank you for shopping through my Amazon links if you go there. Remember, I do get a small commission, but it doesn't cost you more. And always, always, always check about shipping and the price, because just because I've selected it doesn't mean that it's stayed the same since I've linked it. And you always want good value for your crafting dollars. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, ask me a question, and take time to look at the finished projects. Bye for now.